Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one, I'm going to be going over the Week 14 starts and sits. It's the last week of the regular season for most people's fantasy leagues this season, and obviously it's a really important week. I've met a lot of leagues, but in a couple of them, it's a win and get in situation for me. I lose, and I'm going to need some help. So obviously, these weeks are super important for everybody. We want to make sure maybe you're fighting for that bye. Maybe you just got to get yourself into the playoffs. This week's going to be super important. We've got several teams on bye as well. Most notably the 49ers and the Patriots. So certainly going to be missing out on guys like Drake May, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, those kinds of guys that really helped you get here. They're not here to help you this week, so you're going to need to get a little bit creative with some guys that maybe you wouldn't normally start. So we're going to go over the first 7 games in the video today, and then we'll go over the final 7 games in the video that'll come out either Thursday night or Friday. So just like to split it up, that way I can get all the practice reports and everything, and we have to make some educated guesses in terms of who's going to be active when we record these videos ahead of time. So that being said, let's get into it here. If you guys have any specific start-sit questions, let me know in the comments below, and let's get into it. Starting things off with a really nice Thursday night football game here. We get the Cowboys at the Detroit Lions. Massive playoff implications here as well. Either team basically is out if they lose, and if they win, they're still going to need some help in terms of actually finding their way into the playoffs. But this is basically a must-win scenario for both of these teams. For the Cowboys, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and Javonte Williams, they're all going to be must-starts pretty much every single week, but especially in a dome game against Detroit, high over-under, 54.5 point over-under here. You certainly want to be involved with this game. Those guys are definitely going to be in your lineups. And the same thing for Jake Ferguson. I can't really imagine sitting him in this game either. I know he hasn't been phenomenal since CeeDee Lamb came back, but the matchup's there. Again, high over-under, great shot to score a touchdown. I think you're just playing him and hoping things work out. For the Lions, things get a little bit interesting here. I think you're obviously going to play Jared Goff, Jameson Williams, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, I mentioned earlier, this is a super high over-under. Jared Goff notoriously plays a lot better at home, especially indoors. Just a really great game environment here, so I think Goff will be a great streaming option if you need him. The real question here is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's dealing with an injury he suffered last week on Thursday, so he at least had a full week to recover, I guess, even though it was, he's playing on Thursday Night Football. With that being said, he hasn't practiced all week. He's a game-time decision as of when I'm recording this. I'm recording this Wednesday night, so maybe we get an update between now and then. But as it stands right now, it feels like he's not going to play, given that he hasn't practiced. This is a team that they need to win probably all 5 of their next games, at least 4 of the next 5 to get into the playoffs. So they can't afford to risk a re-aggravation here. If he plays, you're playing him. Obviously, he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if he sits, I think Isaac TeSlaa is actually a decent play here. He was on the field for 94% of the routes last week, so he's clearly the guy that's stepping up. You got Cleve Raymond already ruled out. This passing game is basically going to be Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Isaac TeSlaa. TeSlaa, 3 touchdowns already on the year on limited usage, so we know he's a threat to score. If you told me tomorrow night that Isaac TeSlaa scores 2 touchdowns, I think that's actually in the range of outcomes here. So he's a guy that I would be pretty willing to play, assuming that Amon-Ra misses the game. Outside of that, David Montgomery, he's a touchdown-dependent running back too. I know on paper the matchup looks good against Dallas, but they have been a lot better since the trade for Quinnen Williams. They're just really good at defending the run. You can throw on them like crazy still, but David Montgomery, kind of a guy that I'm not super optimistic about. So I get it if you have to play him, but I do think there's a scenario where you're benching him as well. The next matchup we've got here is going to be the Titans at the Browns. Obviously not a game that's super relevant from an NFL standpoint, but we do still have at least a few players we want to highlight here. Obviously, the Browns defense, phenomenal option. I didn't really do a whole lot for you guys last week against the Niners. Can't really do any better than a matchup with the Titans here. So you're playing them for sure. Honestly, I'm not going to play any Titans. I think if you have to, Gunnar Helm and Chig Okonkwo both are super deep league desperation options at the tight end, but neither one gets me excited, so I prefer to just look elsewhere there. For the Browns, Quinshon Judkins, probably a running back too, but just note that the Titans have been a lot better against the run lately since Jeffrey Simmons came back. Actually really hasn't worked out for opposing running backs because you can still throw in the Titans super easily. That being said, I don't know if the Browns can. So you're playing Judkins, which I wouldn't expect him to go off for 150 and 2 or anything. Harold Fannon's the only other guy I would look at. He's more of a low-end tight end option, but you could go there if you have to. Next up, we've got the Seahawks at the Falcons. For the Seahawks, both JSN and Kenneth Walker would be in for me. Walker, keeps getting sort of annoyingly just pillaged at the goal line here. Charbonnet comes in, but even still, Walker's been the clear starter over the last couple of weeks. He's obviously the big play threat. I'm not going to buy into the fact that it's impossible for him to score touchdowns. So you're playing him. Zach Charbonnet, pretty much a desperation play at running back. You could play him and just pray for a rushing touchdown, but if you don't get it, you're probably getting 30 yards in 1 reception. So It's really brutal if you don't get that touchdown for Charbonnet. Outside of that for Seattle, probably not going to play anyone else. I just don't think Darnold's going to need to do anything. The Falcons are not going to be able to score in this one very easily. It could easily be a similar setup. Not quite as bad as like last week was, but where the Seahawks win by 30 without having to really throw the ball at all. So there's at least that avenue in this game, and I just prefer to not play Darnold if I can avoid it. For the Falcons, Bijan is in, obviously. Pitts, low end tight end one here. Obviously had a pretty solid week last week. I think that sort of coincides with Drake London being out. So if London comes back, you're a little bit less optimistic about Pitts, but I think you can still play him. You're going to play London if he plays, and if he doesn't, I think Darnell Mooney is more of like a lower end flex option that you can look at if you have to. Next, we got maybe the game of the week here, actually. We've got the Colts at the Jaguars, kind of a battle for first in the AFC South here. In a dome, too, which is great because we're really starting to get affected by weather across the league here. Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Warren, and Michael Pittman all are going to be must starts for me in this one. Daniel Jones probably makes my lineup as well, and honestly, Alec Pierce should probably be in your lineups as well. So a lot of Colts on this side that I want to get in my lineups. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, a decent streaming option. Actually, has been okay over the last couple of weeks. In one of my leagues, that's the second of my big money leagues. So big, really important week for me. I'm in a win and get in spot right now, so I've got to win. If I lose, there's at least a chance I miss the playoffs. So really didn't do well this week. I've got Drake May on bye, and I went and picked up Trevor Lawrence. Weren't a whole lot of options, but I picked him up over guys like Marcus Mariota. So I do think Trevor Lawrence is a guy that you can definitely play and stream in this one if you have to. Travis Etienne, more of a running back 2 for me here. I know he had a down week last week, but I would just go right back to him as a guy that I think's got a pretty stable floor here. High over-under, good shot to score. It's annoying seeing Tootin get the goal line work, but I'm not going to play Tootin, and I'm just going to keep playing Etienne there. Jacoby Myers, more of like a solid flex play here. We're clearly seeing him integrated into the offense, played the most snaps of any wide receiver on the team last week. Clearly involved. We know he's a good player, right? So I think you can play Jacoby Myers. And then I kind of like Brian Thomas Jr. this week. I could just be a crazy person, but we saw him get integrated back. He looked healthy last week, which honestly I haven't felt like I've been able to say at all this season. It was his first game back from injury, so I don't want to get too hung up on the stat line, especially in a game against the Titans where they just didn't have to throw the ball. So a bit of a weird game script for them last week. This could easily be a high output game. I think you can flex and probably should flex Brian Thomas if you have him. And then Brenton Strange, solid streaming option here. I think I would play him if you picked him up. Next, we've got the Commanders at the Vikings. I feel pretty solid about Terry McLaurin for the Commanders, but that's probably the only Commander that I want to play. We saw McLaurin come back, play limited snaps, and still put up a fantastic fantasy performance last week. We know he's super talented when healthy. He seemed healthy, and honestly, Marcus Mariota is probably the second best quarterback he's ever had, which is kind of sad to say, but it's also kind of true. Speaking of Mariota's more of like a low-end streaming option. Like I mentioned, I went Trevor Lawrence over him, so I think you could probably do better. The Vikings' defense is the strength of their team right now. Their offense will probably put the Commanders in some good spots, though, so we'll see what happens there, but I do feel like I don't want to play Mariota, but you definitely can. As far as Chris Rodriguez goes, you're betting on a touchdown if you play him. I think you can definitely go there if you have to, but if you don't get the touchdown, there's definitely a path towards being really disappointed. And I didn't mention either Debo or Ertz on here. I think both of them are lower tier plays. Zach Ertz, obviously monster game last week. I think you can always play him. He's not going to goose for you, but he's probably going to go out there and go 4 for 40. You could do worse than that, but obviously you're hoping you could do better. And then Debo, been a little bit since we've seen him be dominant like he was at the start of the season, but I still feel like you can play him if you need to. He's a guy, lower tier flex play, but not a guy you have to bench. For the Vikings, honestly, you can sit everybody. Despite how poorly Justin Jefferson has been doing, I'm still playing him this week. The matchups plus here against the Commanders, as bad as McCarthy's been, he's obviously much better than Brosner. So you're going to get some level of competent quarterback play here. I know McCarthy's been horrendous, but I just play Justin Jefferson here. As against the Commanders, you're going to be kicking you don't have to, right? But don't get cute and play a guy like Isaac Tesla or Darnell Mooney over Jefferson, right? You don't need to force Jefferson onto your bench. As far as the rest of the roster goes, I'm not playing Addison. I don't really want to play a running back. I think Aaron Jones is probably going to miss this game, and if he does, you can play Jordan Mason, but you really need the offense to do well because Mason is not a pass catcher. You're going to need touchdowns, and if the Vikings can't score, then obviously Mason can't score. So not great there. And then just one thing I'll note, if we see J.J. McCarthy come out and play well, which I understand we haven't really seen so far this season, but if that happens, just keep an eye on it because the schedule for the fantasy playoffs is super nice for the Vikings. It would make McCarthy an interesting streaming option over those 3 weeks if we could see him pick up speed and actually play some competent football for a few weeks. Next up, we've got the Bengals at the Bills. Really fun game here, actually. Really hope we get Dalton Kincaid back for the Buffalo Bills. On the Bengals side of the ball, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, all four of those guys need to be in lineups. It's exactly what we hoped it would be at the start of the season. Obviously, you're 14 weeks late kind of for that, but you're playing all four of those guys for sure. For the Bills, Josh Allen, James Cook, those guys are auto starts every single week. If you have to play a receiver, I do still think it's Khalil Shakir. They manufacture more touches for him. He's a good player, right? I don't know if you can really say that about any other wide receivers there. So you can play him, but of course the floor is not really there. The ceiling is not really there either. I think you can hopefully do better, but the matchup's definitely positive. As far as the tight ends go, though, the Bengals are by far the worst defense in the NFL against the opposing tight end position. That makes Dalton Kincaid a smash start if he returns to the lineup. And if he doesn't, I feel pretty solid about Dawson Knox there. If you want to get really desperate, you got Phil Haynes there. I know that's a super deep league, maybe DFS style stuff, but I bet the tight end position does well here in this game. Even last week, I know Mark Andrews didn't do it, but you saw Isaiah Likely go out for a big game against the Bengals, even though Lamar played horribly. So the tight end position just eats against the Bengals. I think if Kincaid plays, you play him for sure. If he doesn't, there's going to be value there. I recommend at least looking to see if you can get it if you need a tight end here. Next, we got the Saints at the Bucks. A lot of names to talk about in this one. On the Saints side of the ball, though, it's pretty easy. Chris Olave is going to be in. Devin Neal, more of a low-end running back, too. If you picked him up, you probably did it because you need a running back, so I think you're probably just playing him. Again, I'm assuming Alvin Kamara is going to miss this game as well. If he came back, I'd probably just play nobody. I just can't trust Kamara. Juwan Johnson, he's a solid streaming option. Again, plus matchup here against Tampa Bay. He's just pretty necessary to the offense, so I feel okay about him. Devon Vele, I know he had a great game last week. I think he's a good player, but he's not a great player. He's a desperation flex play, 8 for 94 and a touchdown. Obviously not going to be the norm going forward, but he's a guy you can play if you need to. And then Tyler Shuck, he's a desperation streaming option. The matchup's there, the pace of play is there. You're going to get a lot of plays. Shuck hasn't been playing horrible. I personally thought the same thing, though, like 6 weeks ago when they played the Bucks in New Orleans. It was Lamar in a league. Lamar was out. I went and streamed Tyler Shuck. That obviously didn't work in the same matchup, right? So we've seen it fail before, but if you're really desperate, you could definitely go there. For the Bucks, there's a chance we get all the Bucks back. I mean, saying like Jalen McMillan, Mike Evans, both those guys had their 21-day practice windows opened, so it's possible we get those guys back on the field as soon as this week. For the Bucks, Bucky Irving, he's in for sure. Assuming we get those weapons back, it's a big boost for Baker, but the matchup doesn't really scare me. I think you're playing Baker as like a lower-end quarterback one regardless. Emeka Egbuka, more of like a flex play, a guy that I'd still want to play here, but obviously just has not been what you wanted him to be since over the last month and a half. As far as Godwin and Evans go, I'd probably sit them just to see if they can ramp up. I think Godwin's the guy I'd prefer to play, just because we've seen him already play on the field, but just keep an eye on it. Kind of a joke here. Mike Evans just needs 860 yards over the next 5 weeks to keep his 1,000-yard receiving season streak going. So not going to get there probably, but it'd be kind of fun if he went out there and had a couple of nukes here to make that even something we could talk about. But probably not going to happen there. But just fun. Maybe he'll be back on the field. It's a big boost there for the Bucks. So that'll do it for the starts and sits this week. Up next, we're going to go over part 2 of the starts and sits here. So we're going to cover the final 7 games of the week. Obviously, I only covered the first half of the games this week in this video. That way I could just give myself an extra day to get all the practice reports and everything. So stay tuned for that. Friendly reminder as well, I didn't say it at the top of the video, but if you have players playing on Thursday that would typically be in your flex spot, make sure you put them in the wide receiver or running back spot. You don't want to utilize that flex spot early in the week just in case something pops up over the course of the weekend. Otherwise, if you guys have any specific start-sit questions, let me know in the comments below, and then stay tuned for part 2 of the video. I'll cover the rest of the matchups this week and get you guys ready to roll and get you guys some wins in a really important and must-win Week 14. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you guys with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.